Welcome to Candlewick Library. I'm Cheryl, and today I'm doing my 500 subscriber Q&A. Recently, I shared that I had hit the 500 subscriber mark, and I am so grateful for all of you who have subscribed and stuck around and comment. I love getting your comments on my videos. It's so much fun to interact with everybody. And so I put out the call on Instagram and on here for questions for a Q&A. First, I'm going to answer the questions that are bookish and about Booktube in general, and then I will go to the more personal ones about my family and myself. So I'm going to start with the questions I got about books. A Riddle asked on Instagram, off the top of your head, who are your top 5 favorite authors? That is such a hard one to do right off the top of your head. I tried, as soon as I wrote down all of the questions, I tried to write down what my answer to that would be. And the first names that came to my head were Lucy Maud Montgomery, J.K. Rowling, Elizabeth Goudge, Michael Crichton, and C.S. Lewis. However, there are so many other people that then I wanted to add to that, but those were the first 5 that came into my head, so I'm going to stick with those. Pages and Grace asked, describe your perfect reading day. So my perfect reading day would be, it would be overcast outside, it would be raining, and it would be raining enough that you can hear it, not just a light rain, but a rain that means it, and it would be cold, but not too cold, so that I could be cuddled up under a blanket, have the fireplace on, but not be freezing cold. I would either be alone in the house or everybody would be busy doing their own thing or perhaps even reading along with me, but just so that there wouldn't be a bunch of distractions and noise. It would be in the order that I normally read in, which is Bible first and then nonfiction and then fiction the rest of the day usually. K-Tree at Book Nerd K-Tree asked, what is your favorite fiction and your favorite nonfiction book? So the fiction is easy. That's Anne of Green Gables. The nonfiction, that was a lot harder. So I have a few that I wanted to share because I had a really hard time narrowing it down to one. If I'm looking at maybe a memoir or biography or autobiography, if I'm looking at something about somebody's life, then my favorite autobiography nonfiction is The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. It's such an inspiring story and so well done. Oh, you know what? The other one is God's Smuggler. And then Lucy Maud Montgomery's journals. I really enjoyed them. I have not read the last one yet, but the first one especially is my very favorite. And then as biographies, I really love The Gift of Wings about Lucy Maud Montgomery. This is by Mary Henley Rubio about Lucy Maud Montgomery. It's a big one. It's really big. And a lot of the information in this I did already know because of having read her journals, but I think it's a really well done biography and I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I also really love this book, At Home with Beatrix Potter. This is by Susan Denyer and it is full of pictures and stories about Beatrix Potter's life and her home in the Lake District in England. And I've talked on here in other videos about some of my favorite places that I've visited, and that was one of them. When we were in Hilltop Farm, there was such a peaceful, good feeling there. This might be a little bit like when my mom and I visited Notre Dame, where it wasn't crowded, and that really helped. And when we went to Hilltop Farm, we were the only people in there for a minute, and then there were a few other people. It just felt so good to be there. And it was such a beautiful area. And it was one of the days that really stood out to my mom and me on that trip. So that is a book I really enjoyed. I got that there at her house. And then if it's a nonfiction book that's been really impactful for me personally in my life to maybe change something or make me really think about something, there's a few for that as well. So sorry, this is such a long answer, K-Tree, but I couldn't pick just one. For my spiritual side, I would have to pick No Man Knows My History by Fawn Brodie. This is about the life of Joseph Smith. This is one of the books I read when I was deconstructing my Mormon faith. And it was the one that, as I read it, I didn't know how much of it was true and how much of it was accurate, and I went and looked things up. That is why I have a series of videos on my channel that go along with each chapter of this book. I wanted to make it easier for other people who wanted to find out what things were fact, show the things that I found that went along with it. It was so impactful. The book that probably started my entire thing is John MacArthur's 12 Extraordinary Women. And reading about Eve in this book was one of the first moments of having my eyes opened. So those two were extremely impactful in my faith walk. And then as a homeschooling mom, my favorite book is Educating the Wholehearted Child by Clay and Sally Clarkson. I wish that I had had this book from the very beginning of motherhood. I would have followed so many of the things in here that by the time I read this book, my kids were so much older that a lot of it was, we could kind of put in, but not to the extent that I would have liked to. There's actually quite a few books by her that I could say that about. And then this recent read, Reclaiming Quiet, Cultivating a Life of Holy Attention by Sarah Clarkson, the oldest daughter of Clay and Sally. This one I talked about in my February wrap-up because this was one of my favorite books in February. It was just such a good book to read when I read it. And it has helped me to make my mornings a little bit quieter and a little bit more peaceful. I'm sure that an hour from now, I will think of a book that I forgot to talk about. But since you only asked for one and I already gave you that many, then I'll stick with those. Kelly at Kelly Reads a Lot asked, what was your favorite read aloud with your kids? I have had so many books that I have loved reading out loud with my kids. The first time we read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that was the first book that I think they both gave over 5 stars to. They both gave it so many stars. They loved it. It was a really, really good experience. However, they didn't enjoy the way that series ended, and so both of them have this kind of negative opinion about the series as a whole now, unfortunately. But the first book, we had a really good time reading it. Reading Anne of Green Gables out loud to them for the first time was wonderful. When we read the Little House on the Prairie series, we were able to visit some of the places they lived after reading it, and that was amazing. All of us agreed that our favorite book in the series was Farmer Boy, so that was really fun. In the Harry Potter series, of course, we've read that out loud together, I think 3 times. Every time we've read the whole Harry Potter series together, afterward we have a Harry Potter party and do different things for the classes. It's been really fun. And the last time we read it out loud, we went to California soon after, and that's why we read it that summer, because we knew we'd be going to California in September. So we went to Harry Potter World at Universal. That has been just a really fun core memory for me, is reading that series with my kids. And then the other book series that has been one that they love as equally as much as I do is The Vanderbeekers of 141st Street. The way the family interacts with each other, we all loved that. And then we just loved the stories. And so the whole series stayed that way for us. We loved all of them. That's like the nonfiction question that an hour from now I'll think of something again. But we've read a lot of really great read alouds. Kelly also asked, what moment in a book shocked you? So this one is going to be hard, Kelly, because I don't want to spoil anybody, but there's 2 books that I know I had a moment of shock, because it wasn't just like a book when you're reading it and something happens and maybe it surprises you. So I'm not going to say what the thing was, but if you've read either of these books, then you probably would know which part I'm talking about. One is The End of Divergent, and 2 was In the Book, In This Moment by Gabrielle Meyer in the Timeless series. Then she also asked what was the first book I remember reading on my own. And I actually don't know. I can't remember the first time I picked up a book and read it on my very own. I do remember having a little cassette tape player, and we had little cassette tapes that were Disney books on cassette, and I would have the little Disney books. So that wasn't technically on my own, but it was the first books that my mom wasn't reading to me. And my favorite was The Fox and the Hound. And so I would sit in my room and listen to The Fox and the Hound and, flip through the book, reading the words along with the cassette tape. Other than that, I just don't remember, but I know the books that I read the earliest. So if I'm looking at, first or second grade, I remember the books that I was reading a lot during that time were the Ramona books, and then also the Archie comic books. I used to make sock puppets and paper bag puppets and put on puppet shows of the stories in my Archie comic books for my family and make them sit and watch. Kelly also asked, if you were to be cast as the female protagonist in a book to movie adaptation, who would you play? I mean, my dream when I was younger definitely would have been to play Anne in an Anne of Green Gables adaptation, or to play Jo in a Little Women adaptation or something like that. The problem with me, if I had ever been in an adaptation, is I would be that really annoying actor that would be like, wait, that's not how it was. Oh, we can't leave that out. Oh, don't put that in. That wasn't in the book. I'd be obnoxious. But now that I'm older, probably if I was going to play somebody, it would be Marilla. So I could still be in Anne of Green Gables, but I would be more likely to be able to play the Marilla character. Oh, actually, or I don't remember if it ever said how old Miss Stacy was. I mean, we know that she's not married until later in the series, but they didn't have somebody young playing her in the adaptation, so maybe I could be Miss Stacy. Kelly also asked, if you were to adopt a fantastical creature from a story, which one would it be? I thought about that for a few minutes, and I think that the most likely answer would be Saphira in Aragon. Aragon's dragon. I think it would be pretty cool to own a dragon, be able to fly around on a dragon. I don't know. I think that would be a pretty cool pet to have. One of the other things I thought of is in Leviathan by Scott Westerfeld. There's these little lizards that they use on the airships to run down the wires of the airship to deliver messages. And it's been a while since I've read this book. I really need to reread this series because it's a trilogy, because I really loved it. It's kind of fantasy, steampunk-ish, but I remember thinking that those little critters were pretty cute. Charlene at Coffee and a Book asked, I know you love the Chronicles of Narnia and Harry Potter series, but what other series are among your favorites? All right, so I grabbed a couple off my shelf, and again, I'm probably going to forget a few of them. I'm going to go trilogy and above, so I didn't count anything that only has 2 books, but if it at least had 3, I'm counting it. I really love the Books of Bern by Shannon Hale. They start with The Goose Girl. The next 2 books I didn't like as much, and then the 4th one I liked almost as well as The Goose Girl. I love the Wilder King trilogy by Jonathan Rogers. This starts with The Bark of the Bog Owl. This was actually another really fun read aloud experience. I read this aloud to my daughters and to my parents while we were living with them during 2020 for a couple of months while we were waiting for our house to be finished. And then by Brandon Mull, I really love his Fablehaven series, and also the follow-up series, Dragon Watch. Those each have 5 books. And probably my favorite by him is the Beyonders series. These are all fantasy series. The Fablehaven and Dragon Watch take place pretty much in our world, where it is, human kids that find out that their grandparents are part of a group of people that are caretakers for magical creatures that normal humans can't always see. And then Beyonders is another human kid, but he falls through a portal into a different world. And then, of course, the Anne of Green Gables series. And also by Lucy Maud Montgomery, I really love the Emily series that starts with Emily of New Moon. When I was in high school, I related to Emily probably even more than Anne at that point. This is another set of books that I'm planning on rereading this year because it's been a couple of years since I've read them as well. I've enjoyed the Sinclair mysteries, starting with The Clockwork Sparrow by Catherine Woodfine. I have only read the first part of this series. There is a spin-off series of the same characters later where they leave London and go to other cities, but I have not read those yet, so I can't speak for those ones. And then the Myrtle Hardcastle series by Elizabeth C. Bunce, starting with Premeditated Myrtle. This is a middle grade mystery. I have enjoyed every single one of these books so far. They're really fun. I love the way they're written. I love the character of Myrtle and the other characters in the books as well. And then, of course, Sherlock. I love the Sherlock Holmes books by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So I don't, at first I didn't think of that as a series, but I mean, really it is. It's a bunch of books of the same characters. I would say the City Spies books by James Ponti. I just read the 6th one. This is an ongoing series, but I hope that they'll still continue to be just as good. I've really enjoyed it. It's a bunch of kids that are spies, obviously. So far, they've been really clean. The kids are great, and I love the dynamics in these books. And if we're talking about series that aren't done yet, so I think that they're among my favorite series, but I don't know for sure because they're not done yet. I would say also the Timeless series and the Emma M. Lyon books, as if they stay as good as they are right now where I'm at in the series, then those would definitely make the list. And then one other one I was thinking about is the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins. I really enjoy the series. And also her middle grade series, Gregor the Overlander. I really liked that one as well. Tiffany at Beautiful Minutia asked, were you a reader from a young age? So yes, I was. I have read all my life. She also asked, what books got you into reading? So again, the Ramona books and the Archie comic books. But also there were a few books that I really loved, probably 3rd grade on, that were probably the catalyst for how voracious I was as a reader. And the ones I can think about, some of them I don't own anymore, but there was one called The Pistachio Prescription by Paula Danziger. That one had not a great family in it, but for some reason I really liked it. And then there was one called Who is Bugs Potter? I don't remember who that was by. I'll try to find a picture of it. And that was a boy that would go out at night and drum in these bands and different clubs, and everybody was trying to figure out who this drummer Bugs Potter was. The Westing Game, I loved that book. The Family Nobody Wanted, that's the nonfiction I talked about in a recent video. Heidi, and of course Anne of Green Gables. Millie and Marigold Books asked, what is your favorite book of all time? That's Anne of Green Gables. And what is the worst book you've ever read? I had to think about that one for a minute because there's not very many books that I don't like that I would think worst book of all time. But the one that I'm pretty sure will be my answer for this is The Sound and the Fury by Faulkner. I really hated that book. So that would probably be the best answer for that question. Morgan at Morgan's Endless Bookshelf asked, what are your favorite eras to read about in historical fiction? And that would probably be World War II. I know I hear people talk all the time about how there's too many books set in World War II. While I agree that I want there to be more time periods because there are some that I haven't read very much in and that I would like to read more about, I still love a really good World War II book. And I also love the Regency era, the Victorian era. So those are probably the ones I like reading about the most. But really, I welcome any time period. Molly J. Books asked, what is the one Christian nonfiction you would recommend other than the Bible, of course, everyone should read? So for that, I probably would go back to the nonfiction question, and I would probably say The Hiding Place. Reading Ideas asked, your favorite author and book. So that's Lucy Maud Montgomery and Anne of Green Gables. Chrissy's Purple Library asked, what is the most beautiful book you've ever read? I thought that was a really good question. But I tried to think whether that meant beautiful to look at or beautiful in content. And I decided the beautiful in content would be a lot harder of a question for me because so many books are so beautiful in their story, in the way they're written. And I was having a really hard time deciding what I wanted that one to be. But then if I go with beautiful to look at, beautiful experience reading it because of what it looked like, then that made the question a lot easier. And that has to go to A Fine Romance by Susan Branch, falling in love with the English countryside. It actually could apply to all three of her books. I have the other two, they're right there, about her life. They're all memoirs of her life. Those two are about how she, basically from her childhood to ending up in Martha's Vineyard and starting her life as an artist and author. And this one is about a trip that she and her husband took to England. And I love her handwriting for one thing, but it's all of her books look like a scrapbook or like you're reading her journal, but it's with beautiful handwriting. And my handwriting gets so messy when I'm writing in my journals, my reading journal, everything. But everything is just so beautiful. And she's got real pictures in it, but then also her art, quotes, everything is just so beautiful. I think she's an engaging writer as well, and that adds to it. But yeah, so this would be my answer along with those other two. Okay, now on to YouTube questions. Pages and Grace asked, what made you decide to start a Booktube channel? I kind of talked about this in the Booktube newbie tag, over a year ago, but I really had wanted to for a very long time, but I just lacked the self-confidence, I think, feeling like I had anything to really offer. And then I was watching a video from Christy at Dostoevsky in Space. She was giving advice for people that wanted to start a Booktube channel, and it was in a tag video. And she was talking about how you just do it. You'll love it. And she just gave really good advice. And I had been thinking about it for a while, and for some reason that day listening to her, it put the idea in my head, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it for about a week or two. And so that's basically why I just decided that, you know what, I may be older than a lot of the demographic on here. I might read a little differently than a lot of people, but it would be a really fun creative outlet for me and a really good way to find community. And it has been both of those things. Linda at Book Lady Linda asked, what have you learned from being part of Booktube? I think that one of the biggest things I've learned is that online relationships can be real relationships. Because I think sometimes we say, in real life friends or whatever, but I feel like the people I've met online feel like people I know in real life, even if we haven't met. Then Alma asked, what has been your favorite video on your channel so far? And I think that has been the ones I made last spring about the movie and television adaptations of books. Like my favorite ones, the ones I haven't liked, the ones that I hope they'd make, things like that. I really enjoyed making those. And then my No Man Knows My History series, because they were so much work. I learned a lot while I was doing it. I feel like they've been impactful on people in my life that I know, but also people online. And I'm pretty proud of that series. Even though they're not perfectly filmed, Those were some of the first videos I made, and I know looking back I could do a better job with presentation. Same thing with my testimony video. When I made that about a year ago, I feel like I could do a better job of that now in presenting exactly what I was trying to say. But I'm still really happy that I made those series of videos, and so I think that they've been some of the best things I've made, basically because of what they're about. And she also asked, what has been something you have learned since starting your channel? So this goes kind of with the one Linda asked, but I would say another thing that I've learned is that my ideas and wants in YouTube are bigger than my talents and skills are. I have an idea of how I want my videos to be, but I don't know how to do it sometimes. I love when people have videos that have little clips of movies here and there in them, fun sound effects and all the different, like the really on point editing that some people have that are funny. I've done that with a couple of videos, but I've found it really hard to know where to get those clips from. I've watched videos on where to get them, and then I go and I use something on a video I'm making, but then it never has exactly what I want. Also, I just use the iMovie editing, and it doesn't work as well as I want it to. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles I want it to, but I don't really know where else to go. And when I watch videos, it seems like people say different things for everything. And so if you have a really great editing software that you use, I just film on my phone, put it to my computer, use the iMovie on there. That's all I do. But if you know a really good editing program that is user-friendly for somebody who isn't that technologically skilled, and the best place to find movie clips and stuff, I would love to know, because that is something I would like to do more in my videos, but I just don't know how. And now I have some questions about my family. So Katrie asked, how long have you and your husband been married? Just over 21 years. And she also asked, what are the ages of your kids? I have 2 daughters. They are 19 and 15. What state do you live in? We are in Utah. And then Morgan at Morgan's Endless Bookshelf asked, what fictional characters are you and your family most like? That was a really fun question. It took me a minute to think about this with some of them. For myself, I knew it would be probably a mixture of Anne from Anne of Green Gables and Jo from Little Women and Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Those are the 3 characters I've always really related with. For Doug, I thought of Arthur Weasley. And I don't know why. I've never thought about that until the moment I was asking myself this question. I think it's because he is a really good dad, but he's also not uptight about it. So he's a good father, but he's not uptight about his role as a father. He's a good man, but he's also not a in-your-face type of person that maybe I would be more about my values and, the things I, believe in and stuff. He's not as outspoken as I am. When he talks about the purpose of a rubber duck, my husband loves ducks. I don't know. So that doesn't really have anything to do with it, but it made me think of it. But he's funny. Like all of the Weasleys seem to have a lot of humor, with the exception of Percy. And Ginny, I don't think as much. But he's not mischievous, really, but he's also very curious and wants to figure out how things work and how to do things. So yeah, Arthur Weasley for Doug. For Abby, my 19-year-old, when I was reading the City Spies books, one of the characters' name is Kat, and she is really good at noticing patterns and just the way she relates to the other characters and people in general, and then the way her brain works. She reminded me so much of Abby, and also a little bit of Luna Lovegood. She's very much herself and doesn't care what people think about that. Both of my daughters are that way. And so a little bit of that as well. For my youngest, Maddie, the 15-year-old, I thought of Beth from Little Women, because she's very easy-tempered. She's very easygoing. She's an introvert, so she's not shy. My oldest daughter is more shy, but extroverted, which is an interesting thing. But my youngest daughter isn't shy, but she is very introverted, so she wants to be home and alone. And she's also very artistic like Amy, but she has 0 of Amy's attitude. In the Disney movie Meet the Robinsons, the main family in it, how they are all kind of into robots and technology, she's like that as well. And then I also kind of thought Frances from Swiss Family Robinson, which also could go for me. Frances was my favorite when I was a kid because of how much he loved animals, and she loves animals as well. I asked her, I said, hey, is there any fictional character that reminds you of yourself? And she couldn't think of one. And I said, well, maybe McGonagall, because you're wise and also love cats. And she said, yeah, go with that. So maybe some McGonagall as well. Micah at Micah Cooley Authentic Story asked, do you travel as a family? If so, what is your favorite destination? We do, but not as much as I wish we did as a whole family. That's a lot harder because as homeschoolers and a stay-at-home mom, we can go places where we could spend a lot more time, but he can't miss that much work. So in the past, I've gone on a few trips in my life that were just my mom and I. I've traveled a lot with my mom and my dad, and of course my whole family when I was growing up. But when our girls were really little, my parents would sometimes go on road trips and they would invite us along, and Doug couldn't come. So there have been a lot of trips that have been myself with my girls with my parents, and those have been amazing, really fun. We're actually hoping to do another one of those to the East Coast sometime this year. But with Doug, it's harder because, like I said, we have to go on shorter trips with him. But the place that we've gone multiple times together, we've gone 3 times to Disney World as a family. And 2 of those times, my parents came with us. And one of those times, it was just the 4 of us. And we love it. We love going to Disney World. We've had so many wonderful memories there. We went for my oldest daughter's 5th birthday, and then my second daughter's 5th birthday. And then we went again in, I think it was 2017 or 18. It's been such a magical experience every time we've gone, especially the first and second. I would love to go back to Europe with them and take them to England. And my oldest really wants to go to Japan, but I don't know if any of those will happen at any time in the next few years. And then I have a couple of questions about homeschool. Kelly asked, what has been your favorite moment homeschooling your kids? There have been so many. I love homeschooling my kids. And so there have been so many good moments. There's been hard moments too, but mostly good. And a couple of the moments that really stuck out to me is about a year or so ago, we were reading something in our Bible study, and my oldest daughter ran upstairs and grabbed her New Testament that's in Japanese and came down and talked about how she had just been reading about that in her Bible that morning. And so she read it to us in Japanese. She has taught herself Japanese and she doesn't think she's fluent. I think she is as fluent as you can be without having, visited the country. But that was a really cool moment to see her progress with Japanese and having it come together at Bible study. We did a Constitution class a couple of years ago, and my parents came for that. That was awesome. The whole class was awesome. It was fun doing it with them and all of the conversations that happened over the time we had together on that course. And then last year, we also were doing a biblical archaeology one, and my mom came every week for that. And then eventually my dad came a lot as well. And so again, that was something that made a lot of memories, having them be involved in our school. Mainly a lot of just the conversations that we have where we're reading a book or we're doing a topic, and we just have these really deep conversations that I don't think we would have had if we weren't homeschooling. And that doesn't mean that we didn't have really great conversations when they were still in public school, or that people with their kids in public school can't have that. But there's just some that we wouldn't be doing the thing we're doing when those conversations come up. Just all of those little moments that happen where something triggers something in somebody, and then it leads to a whole discussion where we're hearing different point of views or the same point of view. And I'm seeing the wisdom that my kids have that I did not have at their age. And that has just been such a rewarding experience. Also, we graduated my oldest last year. And so we are not a part of a co-op or anything. And so we just did a little graduation ceremony here at home. She did not want a big party or anything. She didn't want anybody over except for my parents. So I got her a little cap with a tassel and ordered a diploma holder and paid for an online diploma that I just filled it out, and I printed it out on special paper so it looks really official. And my husband gave a little talk to her, and it was just a really, really special night. So that's been a really good moment too. And then Alma asked, what has been your favorite curriculum that you've used in homeschool? And there have been a couple. There haven't been very many that I've hated. There's been some that my kids have hated. And there have been some that now with time we look back on and wish we had used something different. And I'll probably make a video about that. But I feel like we've done the best we could with the knowledge we had at the moment. And so for many years we used The Good and the Beautiful. I wouldn't really recommend that anymore for most people. For some people I would. I do think it's academically sound for the language arts. I definitely have now seen enough of other curriculum to think that there's some things that might be better in a lot of ways. But the Good and the Beautiful Constitution course, that is the Constitution course we did with my parents. That was fantastic. And I am planning on doing that again with my youngest daughter when she is in probably the last year of high school. So I really enjoyed that one. Teach your child to read in 100 easy lessons. We did that when my kids were, not even in school yet. So we weren't really homeschooling yet necessarily, but that is such a good way to teach kids to read. So that's been a favorite. The Master Books Paleontology unit, that's all about different kinds of dinosaurs and stuff. That one was really fun. That was probably the first science that we did that we all really loved. We did like some of the Good and the Beautiful science. We liked their marine biology, but we always felt like something was lacking in their science. So I kept trying to find other science curriculum, and we had a really hard time finding any that felt like they were exactly what we wanted them to be. And so we would just go back to the Good and Beautiful. So we have almost all of their science. And I'd say I liked them, but I don't love them. But that one, the marine biology, was pretty fun. But the Master Books Paleontology was the first one that we just really loved. And it was really geared toward younger kids by the time we did it. But we just aged it up. We left out the stuff that was too young for them, and we added in some activities that were more appropriate to their ages. And then my youngest daughter and I just finished the campfire curriculum, zoology. I think it's called Through the Eyes of a Zoologist, and that has probably been my favorite science we've done so far. And so we're going to be doing their veterinarian one next. Right now we're doing their financial stewardship as well. They are quickly becoming one of my favorite companies that we've used things from. So I can't recommend them on everything yet since we've only used a few of them, but I really have liked them. I wish the layout was a little bit smoother because it feels like it kind of jumps from thing to thing, but I think that's so that you can leave out things for different ages. And then the main thing I would say is books. My kids have retained more about history from the books that we read alongside of our curriculum than they have from any of our history curriculums. And I think that with the language arts, one of the reasons that we look back on the Good and the Beautiful less fondly is because it killed my youngest daughter's love of reading. So I've tried really hard the last couple of years to make sure I'm picking out books that would try to encourage her to read and want to read and would be something that I knew she would enjoy. And then hopefully maybe she'll gain some of it back, maybe she won't. But I would say that the read alouds have been the best thing that we've done probably in homeschool. And if I was starting over from the very beginning, I would try to have as much of our learning coming from books as possible. Tiffany at Beautiful Minutia asked, what is your favorite food? So here in Utah, we have two restaurants that kind of compete with each other, Cafe Rio and Costa Vida. And the one I like better is Costa Vida. And they make, it's like, I don't know if you call it Mexican food or if you call it Tex-Mex, but it's Southwestern-ish type food. And they have these salads it's like a pork salad. So it has a tortilla, it has cheese, it has rice, it has black beans, has a bunch of lettuce in it, and then like a pulled pork, I guess, but they are cooked in a special sauce. The Cafe Rio ones are a little bit sweeter. The Costa Vida ones are less sweet, but they're not really spicy. It's just a good flavor. I don't really know how to explain it. And then it has like a little bit of guacamole, and then there's a special dressing on it. That is probably one of my favorite foods, is to have one of those salads. They also have nachos that are really good. So I really like Mexican food. I also really like just your classic, roast with potatoes and carrots. Or my husband makes really good steak. I love avocados and I love eggs. And I really like pickles. I don't know if that's a favorite, but probably because when I was a kid, we weren't really allowed to snack very much. And when I would read, I would want a snack. And so I would usually have like an apple or a carrot or a pickle. So I still like all of those things. Lucy at the Lucy Chronicles asked, what are some of your hobbies that you have outside of reading and Booktube? Well, I do like to sew. I used to sew a lot of clothes for my kids. Almost all of their Halloween costumes when they were kids were things I sewed. When we would go to Disney World, we would go to the Bippity Boppity Boutique, but instead of buying the dresses they had there, I would make a dress for them. So I haven't done that for a while, but I do enjoy sewing. I enjoy cross-stitching a lot. I showed one time on here, I think it was on a live stream actually with Lucy. I showed the cross-stitch that I've been working on for years because I've been so bad about doing it. Because I have to be watching something or listening to something when I cross-stitch, and I tend to either just be doing nothing when I'm doing that, or I'm cleaning or something if I'm listening to something. But one of my goals this year is to finish this cross stitch I've been doing. It's been about 5, 6, 7 years. I don't even know how long it's been since I started it, but I have a lineup of cross stitches I wanted to do, and I can't get to the next ones until I finish this one, and I know it's going to be awesome, but it's so hard, and it's huge. It is the Beauty and the Beast stained glass, so I'll try to put a picture of my progress on it up right now. It's fun, but it's also one of those hobbies that I have a hard time getting to. Homeschooling and teaching, traveling. I love to travel. I just don't get to do it as much as I would like to. I hate flying, so it always has to be driving. And then also I love to write. I've been a writer since I was a little kid, and that was one of my main goals in life, was to be an author. My 4th grade teacher told me that she expected to see my name in lights because I won contests going to Writers Olympics and stuff like that when I was a kid. And I have written a few books. Most of them were written as a teenager and in my early 20s. Nothing good. But over the last couple of years, I did finish a middle grade book for my daughter that I used as a curriculum. I guess that would be one of my favorite curriculums, is the one I created myself. But I haven't done anything with it yet. I'm currently writing the sequel to it, but I haven't got to that for a while. And I'm also currently writing a book that it's kind of been a secret project, but I'll let out the cat out of the bag right now. Ariane at Book Zealots asked me if I've ever thought about writing a book about my transition out of the Mormon faith. And I've thought about it so many times, but I felt like it would be a little redundant because I've talked about it on here. However, there are a lot of details that I don't go into a YouTube video and everything. But I've thought about it a lot, and every time it's come into my mind, I've pushed it aside. No, I'm not going to do that. And when she brought it up, it stuck in my brain, and I just kept thinking about it. I prayed about it. If this is something that would be good for me to do, I don't know where to start. And when I did that morning, I came into my library and I just started writing, and I ended up writing the entire introduction to it. And that has happened almost every time I have sat down to write. It's just been flowing. So I've written about 5 or 6 chapters of that so far, and that I don't know how long it'll take me to write it, but it is something I am working on right now. And Lucy also asked, if you weren't a stay-at-home mom, what career path do you think you would have chosen? So that goes back to the last question, an author. That would have been that main goal. There are also many times in my teen years I wanted to be a teacher. So I have done that, I guess. For a long time, I really wanted to be a paleontologist. I had a counselor that kind of talked me out of that, saying that it would be boring most of the time. And I wish that person would not have said that to me, because I might have actually done that. I also have always thought it would be really fun to be somebody that got paid to travel around the world and write about it. Something like that. But mainly an author. And that's something I can do as a stay-at-home mom. So hopefully someday I will publish one of these books I'm writing. She also asked, are you more of a cat or a dog person? Cat, for sure. I feel like most dogs don't match my energy level. Like they seem to be so hyper. They tend to just like jump all over you and want to be in your face. And I think I've always liked cats because for the most part, they're just chill and they just want to do their thing. And that's me too. I just want to be doing my own thing and not socializing all the time. And so cats fit my energy better. I don't like the hairless cats. Like, I don't think they're very cute, but probably their mood is just fine. I don't know. I've never been around any of those. There are some dog breeds that I will not be around because of personal experiences in my history with friends and other people I've known. I've mentioned that before, some of them that I'm afraid of. And as a kid, I did get chased home once and narrowly escaped a Doberman. And that was really frightening. And so I've always been a little bit afraid of dogs. There have been a few dogs in my life that I've actually really loved that were friends' dogs that I did bond with. But for the most part, most dogs are just kind of annoying to me, as much as I hate to say that because I know so many people love them. And then there's certain dog breeds that I love. When I was 14, I volunteered at an animal hospital for a while. There were a few dogs there that I really loved, and so I loved those dog breeds. And there was a Samoyed. I really love Samoyeds. I love Huskies and Corgis. And my youngest daughter and I were in a pet store a couple of weeks ago, and there was a Corgi there that was one of the cutest things I've ever seen in my life. So there are definitely a lot of dogs that I think are absolutely adorable, just like cats. But I feel like having a dog would be like having another kid. So much more work than having a cat. Definitely a cat person. Nigel at Reading Ideas also asked, what do you love about living in the US and your state? Asking from wet, windy, darkest Lancashire, England. See, I would like to be there. For living in the US, I grew up very patriotic. My dad was in the Navy. We traveled around a lot. We went to a lot of historical places. I grew a really strong love for my country and for our history. for a lot of the men in the founding of our country. So my favorite thing about our country is probably how diverse it is, how you go from one state to the next and it's like a completely different place. Everything looks different. Everything is different. I like that. The history, the founding of our country, colonial times, revolutionary period, which is funny for an answer to somebody from England. I feel very blessed also when I see some of the restrictions that are on people in other countries and knowing how much easier it is here in so many ways. As far as in Utah, that is a little bit trickier. I would say that it's easy to homeschool here. I would say it's a pretty safe place in Utah, and so I like that. I feel safe driving around, going to Salt Lake City. I don't get nervous really about going there. The mountains are beautiful, and once you get up in them, some of them aren't as pretty when you're just looking at them, but some of them are. Some of them are really beautiful when you're looking at them, but all of them, once you get up into them, are beautiful. In the fall, it's wonderful to drive through the canyons and see the changing leaves. So I'm getting up there in time, but I think I'm going to be able to still do this all in one video. The last section of questions had to do with religion. The first one is from Charlene at Coffee and a Book. What are some good resources for learning more about Mormon beliefs and practices other than the Book of Mormon and other LDS literature? As a traditional historical Christian, it can be hard to know where to start in learning about others' beliefs, especially Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. This is one of the questions that would make Mormons squirm, because they really don't want you to listen to ex-Mormons or other sources besides the Mormon sources. So one of the first things you would probably hear from somebody that's Mormon, if they watch this, or if you talk to them and you said that, they would say, talk to somebody who is a Mormon. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing that along with other things. But I can tell you from experience, if someone says that to you, when I was an active, faithful Mormon, I was one of those members that was all in. I was doing things even when I didn't want to do things. I was studying faithfully. I read my Book of Mormon, going to church most of the time. So I guess I wasn't as good as some people that never miss. But I was all in. And I still didn't know most of the things about the Mormon Church that I know now. And that doesn't mean that these are things that aren't true. These are things about the history that I can find verifiable sources from the church leaders now and the church leaders in history that I did not know. These are beliefs that are core to the Mormon Church that have been taught by the church leaders throughout the entire time it's been around that I had never heard before. So I do think it's good to have discourse with people who are members and have respectful discourse with them when possible. But also, when they say that they know their religion better than everybody, that is, for most people in the Mormon Church, completely untrue, but you don't know that it is, so you are very offended when people say it. So that is something I would say, be careful with that, because if somebody says, don't listen to somebody like Cheryl, I can tell you more about what I believe. Yes, they can tell you more about what they personally believe, but it might not be the Mormon beliefs, and they might not know that, because like I said, it was a shock to me, even reading just the church website a couple of years ago, finding out some of the things that were core beliefs that I did not know were, because I had never taken the time to read the website because I didn't think I needed to. So I would say, you said without reading the Book of Mormon or LDS sources, but I actually think if you want to learn about the Mormon Church, if you want to learn a lot, enough that you can have real discussions with people and really understand it, it isn't a bad thing to go and actually read the LDS Church website. They have gospel topics essays, is what they're called, on the website. They're a little bit hard to find, but they have those, and they have gospel topics. What I wouldn't recommend is like their YouTube channel or all the videos and things that they have on their website that are very curated, edited things that are just made to make you feel really good and have elevated emotion, or watching General Conference that they do twice a year where all of the church leaders are speaking. Again, it's very surface level Mormonism, and that's the kind that most members know. And so you won't really learn the nuts and bolts that you need to know about the church from those things. However, the gospel topics and the gospel topics essays on their church website, while they will twist the truth and give half truth, a faithful spin to things, they do admit to things there that a lot of members don't know about, or that are in other things that have been called anti-Mormon lies for many years. And now all of a sudden they've shown up on the gospel topic essays. And that was what happened with a lot of the things for me, where I would read it somewhere else, and then I would go to the church website and read it and realize, oh, that was telling the truth. But now I know the whole story rather than the half truth, and I can find historical records and, different things that back that up. And so I think that that is an important thing to keep in mind, that you can still go to those sources and get a good picture of what the church is willing to tell you. There's also this thing called the Joseph Smith papers they've been releasing over the past few years, and they're about to do it with somebody else. I can't remember who. And those are things that a lot of Mormons will own but not read. And it has so much of the information in it. So those things are important. I also would recommend Gerald and Sandra Tanner. They were a couple here in Utah. Gerald is deceased now, but Sandra is still living here. And they wrote a lot of books, had a lot of pamphlets. They were definitely considered the worst kind of apostates. Don't listen to them. But their stuff is all fact. And they had a book called Mormonism, Shadow or Reality. I have that book, but I got the PDF, so I have it all split up into this little file box where I have different subjects of Mormonism as I was studying, that I put them in there. And so I can't, lift it up to show you. But there was that. There was also a booklet by them called, I think it's called Magic and Mormonism. Those are really good places for really good information from people who were Mormon. In fact, she's a descendant of Brigham Young. And they are very accurate. They're very factful. They have quotes from the people and sources. You can go and, people will say, again, they'll say it's anti-Mormon. They'll say not to read it. But if you go and you read their stuff and you follow all of their sources, you will find out it's accurate. Master Books has a series of books called World Religions and Cults. This one is volume 1. And so this has a section on Mormonism in it. It's not that big of a section. It's like 30 or 40 pages or so. That's a pretty good overview of it. Recently, I got this book, The Kingdom of the Cults by Walter Martin. And there is a section in here on Mormonism that is just over 100 pages. So it's really long. I have not read this whole book yet. I've only read the Mormonism section, but it is so accurate. And so if you read this section on Mormonism in here, you would have a really good view of Mormonism. It still doesn't have everything. There's so much more to Mormonism theology than is in here, but it is really, really well done. There's only a few things. This is the 6th edition. There's a few things in it that I would change, and that is in the very beginning, the quick facts. It says the Trinity consists of 3 gods born in different times and places. The Father begot the Son and the Holy Ghost as spirit children through a goddess wife in heaven. And that one I marked in here because we never call it the Trinity as Mormons. We call it the Godhead. And that is God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost. The belief definitely is that Jesus Christ is a son, literally, of God and his wife. And he would have multiple wives because early church leaders said that God was a polygamist. But that's another thing I did not know as a Mormon, and I doubt most Mormons know that that was the teaching. And so we always talk about Heavenly Mother as just, one person. Jesus definitely was. Satan would have been. All of us are. But I've never actually heard the Holy Ghost be called a spirit child of them. And so I looked it up when I was reading this. I looked that up on the church website. I tried to find anything about it, and I didn't see anything like that. I don't know what he would be. I thought for a while as a member, I thought maybe that was Heavenly Mother. But then we refer to him as a he. So I don't think that was ever the belief. But I don't know where the Holy Ghost fits in. So I don't know if they're right in that or not. So that I would take with a grain of salt. This edition is pretty recent, but there's still some things that have changed since this. They do have a thing called Cross Creek Center in here, and it's actually called City Creek Center, so they got that name wrong. And then they still call it the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, but when the current prophet decided to demonize the name Mormon, they changed that to the choir at Temple Square. I think that's what it's called now. They also talk about the prophet being 93 years old, and he's 100 now, but it is still that same prophet. When they're talking about callings of the church, they say there's a patriarch of the church. But they discontinued the office of the patriarch of the church in 1979. And so now there isn't one patriarch for the whole church. That would be impossible because there's too many people, and the patriarch gives us patriarchal blessings. Each person usually gets just one in their life. It's kind of like a horoscope. It's telling you where you came from, like what tribe of Israel you are. And then it tells you promises and stuff for your life if you stay close to the church. And now there's one at every stake. So your little congregation you go to as a ward, there's a bunch of wards in each stake, and each stake has a patriarch. So that is outdated. But other than that, those were the only things I really caught that weren't completely accurate or were outdated. So I would say that is a really good source. Also on YouTube, not only can you find channels like mine where I talk about it, but there's also channels that are really big that interview a lot of people. And there's Mormon Stories. They do a series on Mormon history that's really good with a panel of people. They interview a lot of ex-Mormons. You'll find that on those kind of podcasts, the people that are interviewed or that do the show tend to be a lot more liberal than, say, I am. And I would say the majority of them don't end up on the Christian end of things, but it is still a good place to get information, because you'll notice very quickly that whether the person is the most liberal atheist in the world, all the way to what you would hear me say about my experience in the church, that they all line up. We all talk about almost exactly the same things because we've all had so many of the same experiences and found out about the same kinds of things. And so it's pretty interesting. It was something that I started watching to find out and feel not alone, even though I was coming out of it at a different place than a lot of those people were. There's also one called Mormonism Live, where they also talk about a lot of really interesting subjects that have to do with Mormonism. These are both things that are multiple a week things. So you could look at their stuff and find ones that stuck out to you about something you wanted to learn about. I wouldn't go and, try to watch all of them. It's way too much. But I'd say that pretty much covers it. Like I said, I would go to those couple of books, the Tanners, the No Man Knows My History. Read that book by Fawn Brody. That one has so much information, and then you can watch the videos that I've made about that as well. I would say don't ever only go to an active member, because you will not get the whole story. It's just not how you're going to learn. You wouldn't learn everything about... What I found is really funny is a lot of active Mormons, they will watch shows about Scientology and read books from ex-Scientologists, and they don't realize it's the same thing. That you're not going to go to Tom Cruise to find out everything about Scientology. You're going to want to talk to people that have left also, and you'll see the same thing. You'll see that their stories line up, that they saw the same things, they experienced the same things. Anne from In Search of Wonder said, I think you may have shared it before, but I'd love to hear your testimony of coming to faith in Christ. This kind of goes along with the next question from Molly J. Books. How long have you been a Christian? That is a very complicated question for somebody like me. That seems like it would be a really easy question, but you have to realize that as a Mormon, the reason you hear them get mad when you say that they're not Christians is because you think you are. Because the definition of Christianity is very different. To a Mormon, the definition of a Christian is someone who believes in and follows Christ. Again, that sounds very similar to the Christian belief, but then when I come out on this side, I realized that that isn't the definition that Christians hold to for being a Christian. It's not just about believing in Christ. It is that you believe in his nature the way he really was, and you hold to certain tenets of Christianity. So when I was a child, my family was inactive. We were not active Mormons. For most of my family, my siblings and everything, we were. But when I was about 3, we stopped going to church. And so from 3 to 11, I really wasn't Mormon in action, even though I just didn't know it. And I always believed in Jesus Christ. And since for most of my childhood, we were only reading from the Bible, it was the biblical Jesus for me. But I didn't understand everything about him or the Bible. And so I don't feel like I had a full understanding of Christianity or being a Christian. But then from there until the last couple of years, I believed I was a Christian. I believed in Jesus Christ as I knew him from the Bible. I believed everything that the Bible said about his birth, his life, and his death and resurrection. But I now know that I didn't know the full picture of who he was. So I believed in Jesus Christ then. I had faith in Jesus Christ, but I didn't know the full Jesus Christ. So when people say that the Mormon Jesus is different than the Christian Jesus, it is in some ways and it isn't in other ways. We believe in the Jesus in the Bible, but we've added to him. We believe, like I said, that he is the literal son of God, the Father, and that he is literally our brother and Satan's brother. One of the things in Mormon theology that I didn't know, and that most Mormons I don't think know, is that what was taught in the Mormon religion is that God literally had conceived Jesus with Mary. That was something that blew my mind when I learned it, because I had never heard that, but it was taught. that was taught in the early days of the church. And so the idea of Jesus is definitely warped. And so I would say that I've believed that I was a Christian my whole life. But if we are going by Christianity as Christians define it, knowing who God really is, knowing Jesus, his full 100% God, 100% man identity, and the real gospel of the Bible, then it has been 2 years. My testimony of my coming to faith in Jesus is I have videos on here about that you can go back and look for a longer version of the story. The short condensed version of it is that in 2020, I became concerned with things I was seeing in my religion as a Mormon. And a friend shared a video of a sermon by John MacArthur, and I went and watched it. And because of that, I ended up buying some of his books. And I also had a Mormon woman that I was watching that is very high up in the church, and she said it was okay to read other translations of the Bible, which was something I'd never heard before. And she recommended the ESV Study Bible, this baby that I have destroyed. And so then in 2022, after about a year and a half of becoming really worried with a lot of the things that I felt were happening in my church, I started the church program. It's called Come Follow Me, where we all read the same book of scripture together every year, and all the lessons at church, everything aligns with this, but it's very, very shallow. It's very surface level. We were starting the Old Testament, and I was reading my ESV Study Bible along with the Pearl of Great Price, which is another book of scripture for the Mormons. It's the book of Moses and the book of Abraham, and my John MacArthur book, 12 Extraordinary Women. I had quite a few experiences where I realized that what I was learning in my ESV Study Bible, that the John MacArthur book aligned with it. And those things made sense, and they conflicted with the stories about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden and Abraham. All these different things were so different than what I had learned. So I realized that I had the Bible as a book that we used, and I knew Bible stories, but they were never the entire complete picture. And the things that didn't make sense to me, that I never liked, that I put on a shelf and I can't think about that, all of a sudden I understood that that's because those things I believed were not actually in the Bible. So that started my study of the Bible deeper. At the same time, as I learned more, and I started watching John MacArthur more, I started watching Answers in Genesis stuff, and we visited the Ark in Kentucky. And as I was getting really deep into this biblical study, I also then started letting myself learn about my own church history and all of those things that I was kind of learning about because of what I was doing. And so through deconstructing the Mormonism part and going so much more in depth in the Bible than I ever had, I came to that understanding of who Jesus really was and what he really did for me, and how there's nothing I could do myself apart from having the faith in him, and that he did it all. So that is, I guess, how I came to that. Hopefully that answers your question. You can go back, you can go watch the other video if you want more details than that. I would say that the most impactful thing was actually learning what grace really is. That it isn't just that we're all saved by grace to a resurrected body, to a lower kingdom. And then if we learn the Mormon faith, then we can get up higher and actually live in the presence of God and Jesus. But that Jesus dying for us already gave us the opportunity to have that without having to do a bunch of covenants in a temple, live by a bunch of man-made rules. Micah asked, what passage in the Bible has been instrumental in your life? And that, I guess, goes along with what I was just talking about. It would be Genesis. It would just be the first few chapters of Genesis, learning the truth about how that all played out opened the floodgate for me to learn everything else about the Bible and how different it was. Lucy asks, do you have a life verse? If so, please share it. If not, please share some of your favorite verses. This also is in the videos that I made about Mormonism. I shared a lot of the verses of the Bible that are really meaningful to me because of what they did for me during that deconstruction time and that learning time. But I do have one. I'm getting at my planner because I made a spread for it this year. This is the first year I've actually ever picked one verse for a life verse. I made a little spread about that. There is a reason for it. So this is Lamentations 3:22 through 23. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The reason I picked this is because a couple of years ago, again, when I was first learning all of this stuff and I was watching things from John MacArthur, he did a conference called Truth Matters that was at the Ark, and they put it on YouTube, and so I was able to watch it, and it was very impactful to me. And John MacArthur started a hymn at the end, and it was Great is Thy Faithfulness. I had never heard that song before, not once my whole life. And I was like, what is this song? And I went and looked it up, found it, and every time since then that I've had moments of real anxiety or something I was really scared to do, really nervous about, I would play the video of them singing that song. And the lyrics are, Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Those lyrics are extremely meaningful to me. He doesn't change. He doesn't fail. Every day we have new mercies from God, and that everything we need, he's provided for us. So I found the verse that the song was written from, or at least I believe that's where the song was written from. When I was reading my Bible and found that verse, then it stuck out to me after having loved this song. It became my favorite hymn. Before this, my favorite hymns were For the Beauty of the Earth and Amazing Grace. And so this became my favorite hymn. And so I decided that that would be my life verse now, because it has been such a meaningful thing to me. And it is something that I continually go back to. Kind of going with that, Lucy also asked, what are some of your favorite worship songs lately? I don't listen to a lot of modern worship songs. I guess when we visited churches, there have been songs that I've liked, some that I liked more than others, but I don't usually know them. I have to just kind of figure out the song as we've been singing it or just listen. But I'm not very dialed in, I guess, on modern worship songs. I love older hymns, and like I said, Amazing Grace and For the Beauty of the Earth and Great is Thy Faithfulness. One that I have heard a few times that I do really like, I think it's called Great Are You Lord. It's the one that says, it's your breath in my lungs. I really like that one. And then I love the band For King and Country, and some of their songs that are my favorites are For God is With Us, God Only Knows, Burn the Ships, Fix My Eyes. And then on the Christmas album, I really love Emmanuel and Heavenly Hosts. And I like listening to that Christmas stuff all year long too. So that's all of the questions. Let me know if you have any other questions in the comments. I will try to answer those as well. I'll probably do another one someday, but I don't know when. But this was really fun. So again, thank you for being here, for watching my videos, for subscribing, and for those of you that show up in the comments. I really love it. I love engaging and communicating with all of you. Thank you all for being here.